Hey guys, welcome to the session by K21 Academy. In this session, we are going to discuss about Ingress controllers on AWS EKS. So let's say you have a Kubernetes cluster up and running on AWS using EC2 instances. You can check out the video on Kubernetes cluster on AWS. You can find the link of the video in the description. And now you want to deploy applications on your cluster and make them accessible to outside world. So in this video, we are going to show you how to create an NGINX Ingress controller with the help of which users can access your applications. Now let us take a quick glance at the agenda. Firstly, we will be getting an overview of advanced routing and then we will be getting introduced to Ingress controller. Post that, we will be comparing Ingress and load balancer. And then we will try to install Helm on Linux. Post that, we will try to deploy NGINX Ingress controller using Helm chart. Post that, we will be trying to create simple demo applications. And then we will be creating Ingress route-to-route traffic to both running applications. Post that, we will be testing Ingress controller routes on both applications. So we have taken a clip from one of our certification training program on Docker and Certified Kubernetes Administrator, which is CKA. In this clip, our expert will show you how to create an NGINX Ingress controller with the help of which the users can access your applications.
Hey there, welcome back. This is Atul from team K21 Academy, and in this lesson we are going to look at advanced routing with Ingress controller in EKS Elastic Kubernetes Services. Now, so far we have looked at how to create an EKS cluster, worker node and the master node, both using GUI and from a command line interface, which is EKSCTL. And then in the previous lessons, one of the previous lessons, we looked at how to deploy the application or pods, and we also looked at accessing those. Now we are going to take it to the next level now by something called as Ingress controller. Now in theory, we have covered or going to cover about what is Ingress controller, but just I'll give you some glimpse of what is Ingress controller, and then we'll do the lab. I'll explain you in terms of how we are going to do. So we are going to create a pod, in fact, two pods, or assume these two applications. One is called as pod for banana that will host an application called banana. Second pod will be a host application called Apple. We call it a Apple pod. And in front of these two, we are going to configure service. Now, service, as we mentioned earlier, will give a user a single point or point connecting or an interface so that if a pod IP changes or if we add more pods, it will act as like a front end or a load balancing which will forward, and they use labels. So in service, we'll say service is forwarding request to a pod with a label. So we'll say this banana service will forward to all the pods that will have label as banana. Similarly, Apple service will forward request to all bananas, all services, all pods which has a label Apple, like that. Now, before that, in front of that, what I want is, let's suppose I want a routing. I'll say if a user is accessing one single URL, I'll explain, for example, URL is myservice.com or myapplication.com. And if they type /banana, it takes them to the banana pod. If they type Apple, it takes them to the Apple. So that is what we are going to do here. So that's called as Ingress controller. Ingress basically path-based routing there. Now, in front of that, you can directly simply point user to the Ingress URL and then do it here. We are going to take a level further than that. We are going to also deploy a AWS load balancer, where AWS load balancer client will send a request to port number 80 or 443, which is listening on AWS load balancer, which in turn will have a node port, which I'll probably will cover in theory part what is node port, but assume that load balancer is forwarding request to a Ingress controller, which will be listening on port number 30501 or 31667. So these are the this Ingress controller is listening. So my request, which is coming on 80 port number, will be forwarded by this AWS load balancer to 30501 here in this Ingress controller. Similarly, any request coming on 443 will be forwarded to 31667. And again, these ports can change. This is just, I'm giving you an example. We'll see this real configuration when we deploy this. So what we're going to do, we're going to deploy two pods, banana and apple. We're going to deploy services, banana and apple. We're going to deploy Ingress controller, which will point based on the request, which is if banana, forward it to this. If apple, forward it to the bottom one. In front of that, we are going to do the load balancer in front, AWS load balancer, which will be front ending or listening on port number 80 or 443. So this is the lab about. Give you a little bit more about this, what is a load balancer and other things. And in that, we're going to look at what is the documentation or what all documents we have referred in order to for this document. Then we'll talk about a little bit Ingress versus load balancer, and within AWS there are two different type of load balancer. We'll talk about that as well. So this is just to give some theory part. Chapter number 4 talks about prerequisite. What are the prerequisite, which means you already have an EKS cluster, and if you don't have, go to one of the previous lessons, make sure you create an EKS cluster. Then what is Helm? I'll explain you that as well. So we are going to use, in order to deploy Ingress controller, we could have used YAML, but there's a little bit more work for that, doing that. Or we can use Helm, which is nothing but a package manager, something similar. Let's suppose you to install some packages on our operating system, you use yum or apt. In Ubuntu, we used apt. Or in Linux, Red Hat Linux, you might use yum. Something similar for deploying applications or package set of applications on a Kubernetes, you can use Helm. So we are going to install this Helm, and using Helm chart, we are going to deploy application. So we are going to deploy a NGINX Ingress controller. NGINX is basically think of it as a kind of a load balancer, which will forwarding request based on what URL user are typing. So we can do some configuration, and that is acting as a Ingress controller, and we're deploying it using a Helm chart. Then we'll create two demo applications, Apple and Banana, and we'll configure services as well for Apple and Banana. And then finally, we'll create an Ingress route to traffic our applications. And then finally, we are going to test the Ingress controller to test application. Then we'll clean up the resources, whatever we created. And finally, we'll remove the cluster. If you are done with, make sure that remember to create and delete clusters as once you're done, remove the cluster. Otherwise, you don't want to get charged for this. So before moving forward, this is, I said, from an introduction point of view, Ingress controller there are different ways to expose a service to the end user. You can just live with service and then forward and give the service endpoint to the user, and they can access it. Or you can use a Ingress controller in front of the service, which will act as a routing. Ingress will act as a routing, which means you have forward, you have the URI, for example, as I said, explained earlier, banana, apple, or maybe my service, or service 1, service 2, service 3, like that you can do. So that's where Ingress will help. Assume it is a layer 7 load balancer. What is layer 7 load balancer? You need to go back to now OSI networking models as well. So this is all we are going to cover in this lab. So documentation, make sure you follow the documentation, and then this is a little bit about what is Ingress versus load balancer. So this is diagram you see, and we've covered, probably if you've watched the theory, we've covered this in theory already. So there is or maybe we'll cover the theory part on when we cover the sessions. On theory part we'll cover. This is a network OSI model, networking OSI model. Maybe Google it and read a little bit more about OSI model. So one is your network traffic could be at layer 4 transport layer, which have TCP UDP protocols. Or it can be application layer, which is a layer 7, which is HTTP HTTPS level. So the load balancing, which is at a network level, we call which is happening at a layer 4, which is transport layer, TCP based traffic. So which means my data is going to move over TCP protocol. So that's layer 4 load balancer. And in AWS, that's called as network load balancer, which is layer 4. Then you have a layer 7, which is application layer, which is HTTP HTTPS layer. That is called as a layer 7 load balancer. And application load balancer will have capability to do your HTTP traffic routing, which means you can say /* or /store / maybe feedback / something, whatever you want to do. These are my URI based routing. So you can use application load balancer for this, or you can use Ingress controller or application load balancer with Ingress. Now, So this is what we are doing in this example. We are configuring a load balancer, then we are putting ingress, and then we are doing service. Now, if I want to know more about which one to use and why we are using what, in what scenario you'll be using what, there's a beautiful blog, wonderful blog written by AWS team. So maybe worth looking at this, like why load balancer in front of ingress or advantage of NLB over ALB and so on. That's all given here. Now, from an AWS point of view, I want to show you how you can go and create load balancers. So in AWS, under services, you go to EC2 services here. And then from EC2, you scroll down and load balancers. This is where you will see the load balancer. So once we finish this lab, you will see a load balancer being created here. Right now, there's no load balancer, but if I go to create a load balancer, this is where I'm doing layer 7 application load balancer. When I click on this, I'm going to create a network load balancer. This was a previous classic load balancer. We don't use it anymore. This is still available for backward compatibility. So this is what we are going to cover, or we are not going to do it from here. We are going to use EKCTL to create this load balancer for us. Now going back onto here, if you want to go, make sure you search for services, EKS, and I've already created a cluster on Kubernetes. You can do it command line, because hopefully by now you should be familiar with command line, because it's one command and in 20 minutes you have your cluster ready. So this is a cluster with 2 Linux nodes I'm running. So this is a managed cluster with 2 nodes. If I want to see my worker nodes, I can go back to EC2, and here my 2 nodes are up and running. So these first two top one are there. I also have started my Linux machine. This is the Linux machine in which I installed AWS CLI and EKSCTL and other things. So make sure you have that ready. I've already started all this, and I want to go to the cluster or my Linux machine. And if I see here kubectl get nodes, my both the nodes are ready. If I see kubectl get all, if I want to see what all resources I have, I just have a default service which is in default namespace. And if I say get namespace, there is all the default. These are all default namespaces which were created 23 minutes ago. That means I've started this cluster, or I start cluster 23 minutes. Yeah, around 23 minutes ago. Now, first is I need to install Helm on this. So I'll first go and download the Helm. So I'll say curl, and it's downloading some parameters. Output get helm.sh. So it'll save this file as get helm.sh. Now I need to change the permission of this get helm.sh, which means I'm giving a execute permission on this here. And now I'm installing the Helm. So I say /get helm.sh, hit enter. So I already had Helm installed. So it's saying my latest version 3.4.1, it's already there. Now I'm ready to deploy my Ingress controller. So first thing, using Helm chart. So I'm going to create it under a namespace. So namespace is nothing but logical breakdown of, or uh, logical segregation of a cluster, Kubernetes cluster. So you can say, you can divide it and say my department 1 will have this part of the cluster, department 2 will have this part of the cluster, or you can say my application wise you break down. It's a logical boundary. You're breaking down application or your cluster so that they can be used differently for different purpose. So that's where the namespace comes. So we're going to create everything under my namespace Ingress basic. So head into the next lesson where we go and deploy my Ingress controller. Hey there, so welcome back, and let's continue from deploying the Ingress controller. So far we installed Helm in the previous lesson, and now I'm going to create a namespace. As I said earlier, namespace is a logical collection of, or your logical partition of your cluster so that you can keep things or applications separate. So I'm creating a Kubernetes namespace which is Ingress basic, and now I'm going to check the namespace. So you can do kubectl get namespace, earlier create namespace. So this is the namespace which I've created recently. That all default, these are all default ones which were created 93 minutes ago. So I've created 8 seconds ago this one. Now I'm going to add a official stable repository for Ingress NGINX. in Helm. So Helm is nothing but, as I said earlier, package manager in which you uh, add your repositories so that Helm knows from where to download the packages in case if you need one. So we are downloading this repository. So we'll click on this and hit enter. And I already added this repository. That's why it's saying Ingress and NGINX is already existing in this. Now I'm going to use Helm to deploy the NGINX Ingress controller. And let me explain you what this means. So Helm is, I'm instructing Helm to install this NGINX, this chart. So this is the chart name, which is going to download from this repository, Ingress, this repository. And this is the chart name. And I'm deploying it as this my release. So this is my Ingress controller name, my release. I'm saying deploy this under namespace Ingress basic that I created earlier here in this namespace. Then I'm going to say the replica count 2. So basically this Nginx which I'm deploying, 2 copies of that deploy. Now it's the node selector, it's deploying on a Linux machine. These are the 2 worker node that I already deployed earlier when I was deploying my Kubernetes cluster. And default node selector, it's saying default select Linux as well. So just copy this from here. Don't include dollar. Dollar is, I'm assuming this is your putty terminal. So hit enter. Now it's going to deploy this release. Give it few minutes and you're going to get a reply like this that's saying that name is my release and then it's deployment date and time and everything. So this is the output you got. So you should have see it saying it's deployed my release, name is my release. So this is just an output saying this is how probably would look like, but I've deployed this as a name called my release here, and this is my Ingress controller and under this namespace basic. So what it does is I've seen the output, and if I want to see what my list under this namespace, which is Ingress basic, I want to see what's being deployed now here. So Helm list under this namespace, I got a application called my release, which is namespace under this first revision. It's being updated on 26, which means I'm doing it now, and it's deployed. This is my chart name. So Ingress dash Nginx and then 3.12.0. And the app version is 0.41.2. So this is the app which I've deployed here, and there are 2 replicas of that I'm running. So now I'm saying get all, and I want to see list what all resources are there in here. So what it has done is it has created a deployment. And so before that, if I go up, so this is, it has deployed this pod and this pod. So basically 2 pods. So I remember I said replica is 2, which means 2 pods, both has Nginx controller installed. So this is the 2 pods. It has also created a service, and service is in front of that a service, which means request will be received by the service, which will forward it to these 2 pods. So this is my service name, and this is my load balancer. I'll explain you in a minute. That means it has created a load balancer, and load balancer is front ending and say 80 number, forward it to 30909, and then another port number 443, forward it to 30367, and then it has created a deployment, which was nothing but my Nginx, and replica set 2, which means 2 copies of this Nginx. That's what it has done. If you scroll down, and if I have to see the get service, I've already highlighted the service here, but I want to see just service. On above, I saw there was this service and this service. So same, I'm just this time I'm counting this service. So this is the service which I got, which is Nginx controller. This is the load balancer it has created in AWS Elastic Load Balancer ELB that you see. So this step will also create a load balancer. And if you want to see this load balancer, you go to AWS console. So let me go back to again, let's suppose I don't have this. This is the load, this is go to search for EC2. Inside EC2, scroll down and let's remove, I'm not interested in images, block storage, network security. I'm interested in load balancer. So I'll click on load balancer and let me keep this load balancer side by side. So if you see, the load balancer is AE07, which is AE07 BC and ending with 7701. It's 7701. So this is the load balancer. It has created this one here. This what you see. Now this load balancer is listening. If you see listeners, it's listening on port number 443 and 80. If I want to look at instances, the backend instances are these two backend instances. If I go to listener, so if you see 443 is forwarding request to if this 30367, and this is where it's basically my two nodes, which are my two worker nodes. So any request coming to this load balancer port number 443 will forward it to this. Any request coming on port number 80 will be forwarded to this port number. On which server? These are two instances. These are my worker nodes which I've done. So worker node is E5 and CD. So that I can do on C E5 and CD. So instances, say E5 and CD. These are the two instances, worker node, my worker node. So this is the load balancer setup. We can see health check and other things. These are some of the configurations. So that is what is being done by the Ingress controller when we are running that command Helm chart. So the chart has successfully deployed this this load balancer. So this is now we have done. So we have done the front end, this part, and we have done this part, this Ingress. Now I'm ready to deploy the application, this backend part, in which I'm going to deploy two pods, one for Apple, one for banana, and the two services, one for banana, one for Apple, so that any requests that's coming from Ingress are forwarded here. So first is I'm going to clone my repository from Ingress controller to my local machine. So let me bring here, and it will download. So it's saying the file is already existing. So let me remove it because I downloaded earlier on previous iteration. So I've removed it, and now I'm saying git clone. So it has downloaded the directory. So I need to go to, or just leave it here and say now I'm going to this folder cd EKS Ingress controller, and I have created a, so I have a file called apple.yaml, and then I have a banana.yaml. And so what is apple.yaml and banana.yaml? So let's open it. So it's saying I'm creating a pod, name is Apple app, and that is basically all it's doing. Apple is doing is it's doing HTTP echo, and then say if someone accesses this page, they'll say text is equal to Apple. And then in front of that, I'm creating a service of Apple. So this is what I'm doing in this service, which is Apple bottom one, this pod, which will echo Apple, and in front of that, this service called Apple here. So this is what I'm doing in Apple. Similar to that, I'm doing in banana as well. So if you see here, I'm creating this pod. Inside that pod, I'm creating a container with an image called HTTP echo, and output I'm saying is banana in this, and the listening on port number service 5678, this service here. So if I go further down, I've copied these files and saying 𝐶, and I'm creating them inside my namespace Ingress basic. So it's a service pod and service created for Apple. I want to do something similar for banana. So if we hit enter and saying Apple, sorry, pod and service created for banana. So now I want to see what all my services. So I got two more services. Earlier I did for load balancer, and now, so this is for my external service. This is for Apple. This is for banana, which was created 9 seconds, 18 seconds earlier. This was Ingress controller, which was created when I did Helm, using Helm I created. Now I wanted to see pod as well, so I can add here in pod. So verify the pod, and if you see now, I said 𝐶 get pod created. So this is my Apple pod, which was created 85 seconds back, and banana pod, this was this. And remaining two pods were the pod which I said for Ingress controller, which was created using Helm chart. I said two replicas, that's why I see two pods. So now these are my pods on this. I hope that makes sense. Then next is I'm creating an Ingress. So next I'm creating is in front of these two. So so I created earlier artifact. Now I'm creating that inside my Kubernetes cluster. So I'm saying this NGINX, and that is where I'm putting a rule saying that if banana forwarded to this, if Apple forwarded to this. So let's look at this example. So it's saying example is Ingress, kind is Ingress, and it's saying if path is /Apple forwarded to service Apple service, listening on 5, 6, 7, 8. Similarly, if path is banana, forward it to this. So that is the ingress control. This is the ingress which I'm setting it up here. So again, I'll go here, create example, ingress YAML. So my extension ingress created. I just want to kubectl verify the ingress. And now I have an example ingress, which is linked to or tied to the load balancer, which is this one here. So now I'm good. I've already configured everything. I need to now ready to test it. So I'll go to my load balancer and copy this URL, which is my DNS name, a record. I have to pick it and then open the browser, HTTP and colon, and say Apple. Let me make it slightly bigger. So because otherwise text might be slightly slower. So let me make it bigger, Apple, and hit enter. And now if you see it's Apple here, let me make it slightly bigger. Because I'm typing Apple, it's saying Apple. If I type banana, I should get banana now. And now this was HTTP. I can do, because I have both the listeners listening, HTTP and HTTPS. So if now type banana, it's saying not secure. Yes, it's okay, advanced. And say, because it's a self-signed certificate right now on that load balancer, it's a self-signed certificate. That's why I'm getting this warning. So saying proceed. Now I got banana. This is now this time HTTPS, and say Apple. Hit enter. Now I got the Apple. So this is how we have tested Apple and banana. So this completes this Kubernetes, this cluster or this deployment. Just to do a quick recap, what we did earlier here, or let me go back to deploying the application. So what you are doing is, when you, as the browser here, you're going to 80 or 443, it's forwarding to the load balancer. Load balancer backend is saying 30501 or 31667, pointing to the two worker nodes on which my NGINX pods are running. There are two pods running for NGINX. That has a rule which says if banana, forward it to this service, if Apple, forward it to this service, which in turn then forward it from this service to pod 1 or this pod or that pod. And that is how you can then now, if pod fails, if these pod fails, a new pod comes with a new IP, this service will take care through labels. Similarly, this NGINX will be front-ending to the app, to the load balancer, and so on. So I hope that is one of the use cases on explaining NGINX ingress controller. Now, once you have done, make sure you clean it up. And so I'm going to clean up the resources so that I can then delete if this cluster if required. So I'm going to select this and say Helm uninstall NGINX Ingress. I'm uninstalling now NGINX Ingress under this namespace. So hit enter. So you have to use application name is my release, and hence Helm uninstall my release. And because that was my app name, so I did a list, Helm list namespace, which was pointing to my release. And yeah, so this is now uninstalled. I can delete my namespace Ingress basic as well. So all the artifacts or all the things inside that will also be deleted inside that namespace. Now, make sure you delete the cluster. If you're not doing any lab now, delete the cluster. If you come here in the load balancers, my load balance is gone now. My worker node will still be there because I've not deleted the cluster, but my load balancer is gone, and all the applications running, because I've deleted the works or namespace, all the related artifacts are gone. So this completes your lab on the Ingress controller. Make sure you go and follow this guide and create a advanced routing with Ingress controller on EKS Elastic Kubernetes Service.
So we have put down everything about the certification, including the basic concepts that one should know everything like microservices and Docker, networking, storage and app stack in Docker, Kubernetes architecture and installation, security, troubleshooting and high availability, networking, deploying, application stack, and advanced networking. In this 12-week roadmap, we take you from basics to advanced level along with the tips and resources for clearing the certification exam. We also have a separate team working for CV preparation and on-job support. So if you want to become Docker and certified Kubernetes administrator and want to learn right from basics to expert level, then we have a comprehensive step-by-step training for you that includes hands-on labs, including exam preparation, and the most important part, 1 year on-job support. If you are interested in this program, then I would highly recommend you to attend our free class which covers most of the topics like why learn Docker and Kubernetes. And under Docker, you will be learning what is container in Docker, Docker architecture. And under Kubernetes, you will be learning what is Kubernetes, why to use it, Kubernetes architecture and pods, highly available and scalable applications, and many other topics. So if you are interested in attending this free class, you can visit k21academy.com/kubernetes02. You can also find the link in the description.